I'm Leanne Tran, psychologist who's worked with families whose kids don't fit the mould for almost 20 years. I've worked with children for decades, but I know parents are the real change makers when it comes to their kids. Having 3 kids of my own means I know it's not easy. Parent Like a Psychologist is all about simplifying how you support your kids with psychology information filtered through years of experience to take you from overwhelmed to confident. Come on in. Hi, thanks for joining me again. I have realized as I start these episodes, I don't have like a little catchphrase to use every time to open it. It's weird to be thinking about it in the moment. What do I say at the beginning? Um, so yeah, I don't know. That's a problem for me to solve, I guess. I don't want to put that on you guys. So today, last episode, I was talking about when to know whether your child might have ADHD or not. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about the support that's available at school when kids have ADHD. This is a part of both the ADHD courses I have for parents. There's one to support your teen, ADHD teen, and there's one to support your ADHD primary schooler, because I know that making sure kids are doing well at school is an area that parents often want to some advice about and help. You know, they want to help their kids at school. Often parents can feel like they know what they're doing at home and they know how to help, but they just don't know how to make sure that the school or, you know, what to ask for at the school and what's reasonable or not, and that kind of thing. So in the program where I help you with supporting your ADHD teenagers, it's a lot about for them to know what support they have and how they can advocate for their own support at school. But for primary schoolers, it's a little bit different. It's about, it's usually parents are engaging a lot more with the classroom teachers. I think the difference is that there is that classroom teacher that's one person throughout the week. So there's one point of contact, and that makes it a lot easier to know who to talk to at the school. But the other difference too is that kids who are younger don't have that capacity yet to advocate for what they need. And so it's often our job as parents to keep doing that. So I'm going to talk through a little bit about what some of the classroom strategies might be. There's, I think, 8 ideas altogether. But part of the important thing, I think, is to keep that communication between parents and teachers open. And so that might be by making sure that you have regular updates or more meetings than just the usual parent-teacher meeting. They're usually really short. It might mean that you have a longer meeting with your child's teacher. It might mean that you have a meeting at the beginning of each year. And maybe you keep in touch via email or something like that a little bit more frequently. I think it really depends how your child's going. When everything's going okay, you might not have any extra communication, but when there's some changes potentially, which happens a lot around either starting medication or changing medication or goals that you're working on or challenges your child has, there'll be more communication at that point. And the other thing to mention too is that if your child's having some significant difficulties, which means they're seeing some allied health professionals like a psychologist or an OT, those people can be part of that process as well. So whether that's having a meeting where they are present to be able to share information and recommend some strategies or answer questions that the teachers have. Otherwise, you can ask those people to provide some information about school support. So, yeah, it's really important to keep that communication open. I'll talk to you a bit at the end about a sheet that I have that you can access as well so that you can provide some of that for your school. So the first thing to think about, the 8 strategies, I'm going to count them off to make sure I'm on track. The first one is having a structured environment. Often case, Oftentimes school is already structured anyway, but I guess trying to make sure that there's a really consistent routine is going to help um, ADHD kids, but also all of them as well. So that's why often these things are already in place. But the more kids know what to expect in the course of their day, the better they'll be able to handle it. But the thing for ADHD kids too is to make sure they get really clear instructions from their teachers. So that is probably going to be shorter instructions um, where possible, and broken down instructions as well. So if there are a few instructions kids need to follow, it's going to be a lot better if your teachers can give them one at a time. That that in effect is breaking tasks down into smaller, more manageable chunks. So it might be, for those transitions when kids are going out to play or coming back in from play. In my visits to schools, I often see that teachers might give instructions, for example, to put the class iPads away and then go and get your hat and then stand at the door or something like that. And so if your teachers know that your ADHD kids might just need one at a time, so it might be, trying to think of a made up name at the moment, let's say Zoe. Zoe, put the iPad away. She goes and does that. Okay, Zoe, now next thing. So being able to give kids one instruction at a time is going to help them follow them, really, and that's what teachers want. The number two is what we call preferential seating. So it does actually help. Research has shown that it does help to have kids away from distractions. So that might be potentially close to the teacher and away from things like windows and doors and even at the back of the class or high traffic areas where there's lots of times people coming through, that can minimize the distractions that kids experience. And it's those distractions that make it really hard for them to come back to their task. The other part about the seating is letting kids have flexible seating as well. So it might mean that it brings in some movement, like a wobble stool or a wobble cushion, or maybe even a standing desk at some point as well. So really thinking about where they sit in the class and how that can suit their needs. The third thing is use visual information. And so this is because when we give an instruction verbally, it goes into someone's mind and then it may disappear. We have to rely on our memory to remember it. But if you use a visual piece of information, then that's a permanent product that kids can then refer back to. So having their schedule for the day, timetables and that kind of thing, visual and on their desk is great. But also teachers can use it by giving kids a task card and things like that. So it's instructions for what they need to do for each task on their desk, right where they need it. Because we know, and I talk about this heaps in the Supporting Your ADHD Kid programs, that kids need help in the moment, exactly where they are at that time. So on the wall at the front of the classroom or on the way in is no good, because once they're in their seat, they've forgotten about it. So having that visual information really available is a great step. Fourth idea is positive reinforcement, and that's what we use as, rewards or encouragement is another word for it. And if teachers know that, so kids with ADHD respond incredibly well to reinforcement because of their different ways of a different kind of brain motivational systems and processing rewards and information systems. So if they can give immediate good feedback to your kids when they're doing what they should be doing, that's really, really positive, and it's going to help them so much to be able to do what the teachers want them to do in class. As well as that, you can use some reward systems or token systems as well to encourage kids to keep on track. And that helps them, I guess, throughout the day to maintain trying their best, yeah, throughout the whole school day. The next part is some organisational tools. And these are things that help kids stay on track as well. So it might be things like checklists to use for tasks. So even for something like a paragraph, if teachers are, if kids are at that point where they're learning the bits to go in a paragraph and they're doing their writing, they could have a little laminated card with a checklist on it that teaches them, just reminds them, what do you have to do? You have to have an opening sentence and something else, and then the conclusion. So actually little checklists that help them because it reduces that memory load. Anything you can do to reduce the memory load is going to help. So that's where the other organisational part comes in, which is doing things like colour coding. And so to help your kids organise their stuff. The next idea, number 6, is movement and breaks. And I think that's something that I know kids tell me a lot about, that they have trouble with. They have trouble sitting still, and because I'll often ask, what do you get? Do you get into trouble at school? Most kids do, and then they'll say, yeah, I get in trouble for not sitting still or getting out of my seat or that kind of thing. So the more that your teachers can incorporate movement breaks into your child's school day, the less trouble they'll have with that. So it can, short little breaks of doing, a lap of the classroom or something like that, or they can get up and they can hand out the sheets for the teacher, or they could, whatever it is. But don't wait until they're having trouble. Encourage the teachers to see that if they give movement breaks for the kids throughout the day, that it's going to be better. I know kids do get movement, but with ADHD kids, it's just that they need more than the other kids do, and they're going to have more trouble regulating than the other kids do. So even breaks within the session times to get up and move around will be helpful. And another way that kids can get that movement is through things like fidget tools and stuff like that as well. Kids tell me a lot too they're not allowed, which is a real challenge, I think. And so I often will recommend things that give them the ability to move, but are boring enough to not be distracting, and also something that doesn't draw focus and attention. And that's often the problem that teachers have, is that if kids are allowed to fidget with something, then other kids want to pay attention to that. So my favorite go-to is blue tack, because it does let kids fidget and fiddle with it and move it. They can kind of roll it in their hands or whatever and string it out. But it's boring enough it doesn't get them distracted, and it's not out of place in the classroom. So you'll have kids look around and go, oh, I wish I had a fidget spinner, but you probably won't have them say, oh, I wish I had a lump of blue tack. It's not as exciting. So yeah, these are all great things that you can talk with your teacher about trying to build into your child's day. I know we talked a bit about positive reinforcement and reward, but the other thing that's important, I think, is supportive communication. And so this is using positive language to children about the challenges that they're having. And so that might be, saying things like, rather than you're like, why can't you do it? Or that, I know teachers don't really say that, but, I think the more that teachers can tell kids things that are more positive, like, this is just extra tricky for you and you're working so hard at it, and I can really see you making progress, that builds up the positive self-esteem and resilience in kids. And then on the flip side of that, I guess you need to have really clear expectations for kids about what's okay and what's not okay, because if kids aren't sure, then they won't be able to succeed as easily. And then the last bit, I think we talked about lots of these strategies, the way that teachers can support your kids in the classroom. this can often all occur within, it's kind of individualized for your child. And they easy enough things to do, but they are individualized for your child. And that's the last point I want to make, that teachers can individualize how they do things like teach your child. So this, as an example of that, there's one, it's a fancy term, differentiated instruction. Really what it means, if you see it in any reports, I know I try to explain it when I put it in mine, it just means teaching kids in a different way that suits them. So that might be tailoring the instruction, so using shorter language, using some demonstrations and some visual reminders. It basically means, can you teach them in a little bit of a different way that fits better with their brain style? The other thing too is that teachers can use some one-on-one or small group work as well. So just to make sure that your child's on track with what they're learning. It doesn't have to be long or often, but it can just be a point to check in to make sure that they are grasping what they need to do and not feel lost. I think it's really, particularly girls have the ability to fudge through, because they can look around and see what other kids are doing and they will copy that. Boys do it as well. I have had boys tell me recently that they just kind of look around and follow. So having that one-on-one check-in is really important. So in summary, that's 8 different ideas about ways that your teachers can individualize the support they give your child to meet their ADHD brain style. And it's a way that, is not too difficult to do. I think the challenge for teachers is that there's so much to do in the day and so many different individual people in their classroom that it can be really tricky to do it all. But those ones are, I think, fairly simple to do in the classroom. And if you're keeping in good communication, as I mentioned in the beginning, throughout, then that's going to really help you know what's working and what's not, and helps remind the teachers as well about how your child needs stuff done a little differently. So a lot of this, as I mentioned, is covered in the programs that I have for supporting your kids with ADHD, teens or primary schoolers. But I've also recently done a fact sheet for people in my private practice that I see, to be able to take this information for schools. So glad I remembered that as I was talking just before, and I'm going to upload it for you on my website. And so there it will be at leannetran.com.au/free. I'm going to list all the resources there that I have one by one as I think of them and mention them. So it's going to talk about classroom strategies for kids with ADHD. So feel free to download that, and it's in fact sheet format. So it's something that you can use to take along to teachers when you're having this meeting. It's going to be generalized, of course, because I don't know your child, but you and your child's teacher can run through them and see which ones they think might be really helpful, and use that to be able to support your child. I know we're nearly at term 4, but sometimes term 4 is the hardest, so it could be a really good time to meet with your teacher and double down on the support. So hopefully it's helpful. Please do give me any feedback, and do feel free to share it with your school. Happy for them to take it and use it if they find that it's helpful. Hopefully you do as well. Yeah. And I look forward to hearing how it goes. Thanks for listening to this episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. If you found it helpful, please share on Instagram so other parents can benefit too, and tag me at Leanne Psychology so that I can say a big thank you. Head over to leannetran.com.au to join the village, for bite-sized psychology tips straight to your inbox. I really hope this podcast has brought a new perspective and you a step closer towards a calm parent and a thriving child. Have a delightful day.